So it's Friday night with Byline Times, with me, Peter Jukes.
And me, Hardeep Matharu, and over the next hour we'll be bringing you what the papers don't say.
And what the TV doesn't usually tell you. Well, coming up, 2022. Is it over yet? Is it safe to come out? It began with the first major war in Europe since 1945. We've had 3 prime ministers, the death of a monarch, strikes, energy hikes, rising interest rates, and a declining pound. To discuss all these wonderful events of the last year, we'll be joined on the blue sofa by Labour MP Dawn Butler. But we can only do it with you, can't we, Cathy?
Yeah, as we always say, Byline TV is your TV channel. So if you do like what we do head over to byline.tv/join. You can become a member. There are plenty of perks, and you get to join us for our After Dark Q&A, which takes place every week after this live show ends.
And this week we hope to be joined by Dawn Butler. It'll be a slightly shorter show because we are all exhausted. I'm sure you are too. It's cold, the trains don't work, and everything else has happened this year. We've also put to bed, and it was a very late edition, keeping us up nearly all night, our print edition, which leads on the great Brexit, the tragic Brexit trap, Hardeep. And that leads with an article of yours about something you saw in Brussels.
Yeah, it was in the museum which looks into European history, and it was our Union Jack, which was taken down from where it flew with all the other member states on the day that we officially left the EU in January 2020. And it was put in this box in the museum. And so my piece explores the Brexit discussions and where they've come to, yeah. Yeah,
you mentioned as an open casket or dead and buried. And you talked to, we've had her on the show, Annette Dittert, about what a tragedy this is for Britain. But you've also spoken very interestingly to David Goodhart, the theorist, one of the sort of, if you like, intellectuals of Brexit, who thinks it is dead and buried rather than an open casket or unresolved.
Well, he thinks it is a win because it restored democracy to Britain. So.
Yeah, it's where we're seeing a declining economy. So, I mean, we always say we couldn't do the paper without you. Do subscribe, and that's what keeps the paper going. And that's for the TV, as we'll see in a moment, thanks to Marina Purkis, who presents our Tables show. We couldn't do the TV without you.
I'm Marina Purkis, and I've got a problem. Where do you go to get your news? Because wherever I look, I see propaganda, misinformation, and culture war bollocks. Where are the serious questions? Where is the meaningful debate about things we actually care about? And where is the accountability? I am so done with watching script-bound presenters interview the same old faces, letting MPs spout the same old party lines, hearing dark money think tanks air their views unquestioned.
What I am saying is...
And seeing industry shills platformed in the pursuit of false equivalence. Enough. It's time for Byline TV. Byline TV's reporting on Brexit got millions of views. Why? Because it revealed the truth. It let those impacted tell their own story and revealed inconvenient truths. And they hold the media to account, challenging the falsehoods that poison our political discourse. No agenda, no dodgy funders, and no board threatening to pull our funding if we don't toe the party line. It's just the news, as it should be. But that's why we need your help. We don't have deep pockets, nor dark money, nor billionaire backers. We just have you, our members. Now we need 5,000 of you to help us keep challenging the right-wing narrative and keep pumping out those truth bombs. Become a member for £5 a month and get access to an incredible library of content. Hundreds of hours of political reporting you just won't find on the BBC. Stream live shows including Friday Night and my debut political discussion show, The Table. And pour yourself a drink and join us for After Dark, our live Q&A session after every show. Join now with code MARINA and you'll get your first month for just £2. Head to byline.tv/join and help us change the conversation. We can't do it without you.
Well, how lovely to be joined by Dawn Butler. And we haven't seen you for a while, and it's amazing. It's the last Friday before Christmas Eve, and you joined us on the blue sofa. Thank you so much.
Great to be here, Byline. Absolutely great.
We missed you. I know you've been busy, and you agree. This has been an exhausting year.
An exhausting year. An exhausting couple of years, really, right? I mean, politics has been like a maze. I mean, then there's been ups and downs. There's all these different levels. You don't know if you're coming and going. I just think when the history books are written, people are going to be like, really? Yeah. You know, and you allowed so much stuff to happen? Yeah, it's crazy.
So shall we start at the beginning, which is really... last year, I remember our big theme was Partygate. Mm-hmm. So we felt that Johnson might not last. What was it like being in Parliament through those sort of turbulent times? Because he clung on for quite a long time, didn't he?
Absolutely. He wasn't going to go anywhere. I mean, he's very arrogant, right? He's got this... it is this privilege that he has about him. And also, I think, because of his schooling and his education, he really wasn't going anywhere. It was like, not unless you absolutely force me out, am I going to go? And he did everything. Don't forget, he tried to prorogue Parliament. He told lies at the dispatch box every week and refused to take that all back. And there was
he said he had not broken the law. He said he hadn't broken guidelines, and yet he got fined by the police.
Yeah, exactly. But that was only after, remember, he said all the rules were followed. Mm. He said there was nothing to see here. And then he was shocked. Remember, he was shocked when Allegra had to resign. He was shocked, never heard anything about it. And then, you know, more and more whistleblowers came out, and then you saw that he had a drink in his hand, he had a beer, he did a speech, you know, all of that stuff. So it was only, you had to literally drag him kicking and screaming to tell the truth. And this was our Prime Minister. And like never before, normally a Prime Minister, one lie, the Prime Minister falls on their sword and says, you know, I've brought disgrace onto the House, you know, onto my position, and I'm going to leave. Boris Johnson was like, no, I'm staying.
Didn't some MP point out that he was lying? and what happened to that MP?
That was such a shock. To be honest, OK, so I know that, and the rules need to change. This is the whole point. The point is, we can't have a democracy that's so fragile that we can't hold the Prime Minister account when they're lying, or a democracy that's so fragile that we can't call out a corrupt government. Because last week, the Deputy Speaker threatened to throw me out of Parliament for saying that the government is corrupt. Now, the thing is, the government is corrupt. And if this was in any other country, our government was saying we need to send sort of overseers to those countries to have a look at what's happening because there's so much corruption and the government is stealing billions of pounds whilst their citizens go hungry or their citizens are cold and going to die of cold. That's exactly what's happening in our country.
What would you say? What was you reprimanded for? What particular corruption? Right. It seems quite a lot to look at.
Exactly. Well, the thing is, the interesting thing is this again, and I think Byline has led the way in regards to the PPE scandal. And so remember, like I've been on the show a couple of times talking about PPE, you know, people kind of, in a way, you can see people kind of rolling their eyes and people, you know, were trolling me on Twitter saying, oh, get over it now. You know, you're thinking, well, no, you can't get over it because, you know, there's £36 billion test and trace. We still don't know where that money's gone. There's £6 billion that Rishi wrote off when he was Chancellor. You know, there's, you know, 106 million plus, you know, that Baroness Moan got.
200. Well, so she personally, her family got, I think, sort of 30 or 40.
That's the tip of the iceberg.
Well, we have calculated on Byline Times, there's about 12 billion in PPE. Just for people, it does, PPE, what is that? Yeah. It's a degree they do at Oxford. It is personal protective equipment, which is short supply, and these emergency contracts, of which about 12 billion were done. 3 billion went to Conservative donors and affiliates to this VIP lane, and a lot of it was substandard. So that, what could you do with £3 billion?
Exactly. And it's such a large number that it's hard to kind of compute what that number means, right? And then, so I said, this is, when the Deputy Speaker tried to throw me out or said I wasn't allowed to use corruption, I said, but it smells like corruption, so what else can I call it, basically?
And you had privilege there, and
exactly.
You had privilege, and also you're not defaming any individuals, or you're allowed to. I find that extraordinary. Calling an honourable member a liar, you can see there's a rule about that in a way, because that's
even though he is a proven liar.
Yes, fact on
so but I was willing to take the punishment of being thrown out for calling him a liar to highlight that we have a problem with our parliamentary system, that somebody can blatantly come and lie, but you can't call out that lie. So I was willing to take that punishment, and leave. But I was not willing to take the punishment of calling a corrupt government corrupt.
Heidi, you wrote about this, didn't you? You interviewed Dawn, and particularly about this, because it goes around the corruption of this good chaps idea.
It's reliant on good chaps, and then they get into power and they don't want to play the game. So that's what the system's reliant on.
They're untouchable. They feel like they're untouchable. And this is why so much money went astray, because, the pandemic helped, because while we were all looking the other way, trying to survive it, trying to help loved ones, they decided that they were going to use that as a shield to just steal money. And, there's money coming back into the Tory party coffers through people who received a bung from the government. I mean, somebody donated £200,000 the other day, and they had received a contract for how many millions? It's all coming back. That was the whole point. That was a revolving door, but it's not their money. Yeah. So they're trying to say to people, just work harder, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It's not your money. You didn't get it.
I also think in this country, instead of the word corruption, we should, that's a byword for the establishment elite. They're one and the same thing often, aren't they? Because it's a network that only benefits some people. And
absolutely, very.
That's how it works, really.
Yeah. So Boris Johnson clung on. What do you think finally got him? I mean, what was it that men in grey suits famously turn up and say, "Your time is up, Graham Brady, the 1922 committee"? What obviously it helped that he had a convincing rebel, like Heseltine rebelled against Thatcher in the form of Rishi Sunak, wasn't it? Do you think that was it? There was just enough momentum, there was a replacement?
No, I think at the end of the day, it just became unviable. I mean, Boris doesn't give a shit. Do you know what I mean? Like, he said, I'll be the last person standing. He even tried to come back. So that just shows you he really doesn't care. He hasn't got any principles. But it just became so untenable that he had to...
It was Pincher, wasn't it? It was that the MP who he'd closed down. That was the last straw, it seemed to be.
Well, yeah, and maybe, Patterson as well. When... The thing, it's unbelievable to even say it out loud that they just kept changing the rules and changing the laws to protect themselves and their friends, and saying, well, OK, we've broken the rules. I tell you what, we just changed the rules.
It's because he'd misled Parliament, not actually divulged his interest in Randox, a COVID testing company which got a huge contract.
Yeah, even though they failed every single marker that they were supposed to hit, and they got given another contract.
I'm sure they would have a different point of view on that. But so he was then forced to be, the Privilege Committee said she should be suspended, and Johnson tried to overrule it.
Yeah, he tried to change the rules so that, because it was unfair, because there was no right to appeal, and tried to change the rules. And it's like, this is ridiculous, and everybody can see this. So I think in the end it just became too untenable. The emperor had no clothes on, and finally maybe he looked a little bit in the mirror.
But he's got his own privilege committee, which they're trying to lay. The taxpayer is paying for Boris Johnson to defend himself against what, to me, the quite transparent allegation that he misled Parliament by saying he'd obeyed the rules and hadn't broken the law when he got a fine for it. But he's trying to avoid that there. You as a parliamentarian, Chris Barnt does a lot of work on this from the Labour side, but are you feeling that Parliament itself is realising its rules are not fit for purpose, that needs to tighten up, or is it so partisan, it's really, the Conservative Party who don't care?
Peter, I mean, they're very, very precious about the rules. But, it's really... I mean, it really does need, like, a fresh group of people coming in, because, the likes of Jacob Rees-Mogg, they're very snooty, very snobbish, this is Erskine May, this is how we've always done things, and they don't like to change. And but I think the outside world, the real world, are looking in and saying, hang on a minute, there's something a bit rotten here. Something needs to change. So I think that's what's going to make all the difference.
Now, how deep do you notice why? Because you were editing Byline Times or this, and we've been writing these stories for 3 years about corruption. Why? What do you think made this sea change with the public? I mean, we'll see later in the programme where they will start saying Boris Johnson is a C word, because it all comes out. Why did it take so long? Or were we just impatient and we just knew too much?
Because the media in this country is corrupted, and they pick and choose what they want to report on in the public interest. So Partygate, because it was something people could relate to, was something they went big on, which I applaud them for. But before Partygate, there were hundreds of thousands of people who have died in this country. You know, people moved from it's so upsetting, care homes into hospitals, up tests, and there's all sorts of things were going on, and they were all scandals. And the media picks and chooses what it wants to report on.
Yeah.
And that is one of the biggest sources of the corrupted system, because it's the opposite of what journalism should be. And I think the sea change was Johnson finally couldn't hide, usually his mates in the media, protect him. And I don't think that could happen anymore. But I'm very worried by that, because to me that doesn't necessarily... It's not a sign of a healthy media. It's a sign of a media that is compromised itself. I mean, there are all kinds of things, we'll come on to her, about Liz Truss. There's open secret in Westminster and Fleet Street that there are things about her that have never been reported, which are arguably in the public interest. It is an open secret. And I think all of these notions of what Britain is, such a great country, the mother of parliaments, you know, it's a lie. And it's too big to even confront. And it saddens me to the point where I'm exhausted of having to say these things, as I'm sure you are, Dawn, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't make a difference.
Well, I disagree. It begins to make a difference. Would you agree with that analysis, Dawn, especially about the media? And we say it, by the way, partly I don't mean to bring it in, it's later in the year, but that watching some of that Harry and Meghan documentary, I mean, Byline Investigates has done a lot of work on sort of the legal cases around her and other phone hacking and privacy victims. But it just seems like a bullying racket still.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is this, like, if Byline hadn't have run those stories, and if I hadn't have read those stories and thinking, hang on a minute, I'm there, I'm in Parliament, I'm a member of Parliament, this is happening under my watch. And if I hadn't have read that and think, hang on a minute, and you know, and not being accused, because you know, people are always saying, well, you're a conspiracy theorist, you know what I mean? This is conspiratorial. And you're like, no, this is actually happening. And so because of the work that you did as investigative journalist, it allowed me to do my job as a member of Parliament. And it meant then that I was then able, like at select committee, and if you watch back on the select committee, you know, I was able to question the minister. And you can see it was completely different to the other questions. And they kept cutting me off because they're thinking, what's she going on about? But it's only now that all of those pieces of the puzzle are beginning to fit together. And people was like, oh, okay, people created a company 4 days earlier and then got millions of pounds.
After they got the contract.
And then got millions of pounds. Oh, okay, you know, there's a lot of money that's actually gone missing. So people are now piecing together the puzzle. So, I mean, it's important to be the truth tellers, you know, even when everyone else is trying to sort of gaslight you.
Yeah, it's one of the gaslight. I will say that we should do a promo one day, shouldn't we, this on How Deep, about this, you know. It started with me, phone hacking. It's a conspiracy. Yeah, it's a criminal conspiracy when it got to court. They said that Cambridge Analytica was a conspiracy theory. No, it was true. Steve Bannon's influence, it was true. Hedge funds getting too close to government, it was true. You know, that every time, and that's how they do it, they call you a conspiracy theory and they marginalise MPs who bring it up. But I hope people now listen to you with more respect and they won't shut you down. You should be leading a committee.
Well, I mean, you know, the interesting thing is that I found, because now people are talking about the PP scandal and stuff, some people are acting like they're breaking the story. And you're like, oh my God, we've been talking about this for 3 years. You're acting like you... But, you know, it's interesting, isn't it?
In a way, it's, I mean, we have our scoops sometimes stolen by other newspapers. Sometimes they have a new fact, sometimes they're completely stolen. And part of me goes, give us credit, but in the public interest, then you think, how deep. There's another party, oh, thank God it's out there. We can move on to something else.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think this year has taught us just how important it is to investigate the stories. And I think next year, as I say, I think it's the tip of the iceberg. Next year, there'll be a lot more revelations of things that will that will just shock people.
Going back, okay, so we can't give up, Dawn. Thank you.
No, please don't.
So then we get to the Boris Johnson going. So can we talk without laughing, without you're smirking a little bit, about Liz Truss? I mean, what did it feel? I think we went to Parliament the first time, didn't we, Hardeep, with our political editor Adam Bienkov to see her one and only PMQs. She lasted 40 days, was it? 42.
Yeah, she had a few PMQs.
Oh, okay. I thought we saw her last one, didn't we? And there was something very dissociated about it. What was it like in Parliament that time? Was you just all agog, or was this just more of the same?
Dissociation is quite a good word, because when you look at her, you think, there's nothing there. Like, there's nothing behind the eyes. You're like, hello.
Yes. She became Prime Minister. So maybe that is an indictment of the country we live in.
It is. Actually. It is. I mean, it was quite funny, because I was having this conversation with someone. I think, like a little part of me kind of, I was kind of impressed that she became Prime Minister.
She managed it.
Because she managed. It's like, how the hell did that happen? But yeah, she managed it. It wasn't.
But it is a great symptom of our country.
And a great argument against meritocracy, I guess.
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely.
And one of the reasons we understand, this is reported, I don't know for a fact, was that Boris Johnson wanted her because she'd be so useless. He'd be back, and he tried to come back.
And he tried. I mean, this is the ridiculous thing, right? He had to fly back from his holiday to say he wanted to stand again. Parliament wasn't in recess. He's supposed to be in Parliament. He's not supposed to be in another country. He's still an MP. It's outrageous that the papers were reporting this as though that was something ordinary. It wasn't.
It's normalisation.
Yeah.
Normalises. Because now he's gone straight on. He didn't go to this awful vote when they wanted to leave the ECHR over refugees.
Shocking.
Because he didn't even turn up. But they said he supported it. He's got £1 million in jobs since the...
Yeah, I made a bet with somebody. I just can't remember who I bet, though. That's the problem. That he would make £1 million by the end of the year. So
you've made some money out of that bet. Probably not £1 million.
If I can find the person that made the bet with. But yeah, because that was always going to be his aim. He wanted to be Prime Minister. He wanted to from the age of 11. He said he wanted to rule the world. So, he another one that reached his goals. And, he's a pretty bad advert for crime doesn't pay, isn't he, really? But he wanted to make money, and he's making money, tons of it.
That was the problem, was that the year before, Sun Walters, the Mail, the whole wallpaper gate, these lavish deliveries during COVID, that he hung around with oligarchs but wanted to be one himself, where the oligarch was the Lebedev's former KGB guy and his son who owns a newspaper and these expensive tastes. But now he can have them, can't he?
So why doesn't he then... and this is the thing, I just don't understand why there isn't more of an uproar and a push to say, do you know what, it's fine. He's a very entertaining speaker. He should never have been Prime Minister. He didn't have the ethics to be Prime Minister, but he's a very entertaining speaker. So why not just hit the entertainment circuit?
Like Matt Hancock.
Yeah, and make your money.
No.
Why do you still need to be an MP?
Why do you think that is, Hardeep, that he's still clinging to the Uxbridge seat?
Because of power. But I'm bored of Boris Johnson's psychology,
yes,
so I don't want to talk about it, really.
No,
to be honest, I don't know. Because he wants power. He's like any other entitled, privileged person in this country. Yeah. He wants to be Prime Minister again.
I remember
we should waste no more time on his psychology.
He's never... he's never going to be Prime Minister again, that's for sure. Even though you should never say never with this lot. But I'm pretty sure he'll never be Prime Minister again. But yeah, he should go. And Hancock, well, he's been forced to go, and he should go too.
So Then we come to this turbulence. Well, you had a lot of economic turbulence, didn't you? Liz Truss knocked at 30 billion. Well, because the pound collapsed, interest rates had to go up, and our debt increased in price, lost like 30 billion overnight. With this, autumn statement with Kwasi Kwarteng, who must be the shortest-lived chancellor. I think he survived about 2 weeks, didn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, this is pure libertarian philosophy from these, I always say, these market fundamentalist think tanks who don't understand market fundamentals. What about your constituencies through all that? I mean, here are people saying if they have mortgages, their mortgages going up by a lot. If they're renting, their rent's going to go up. They're seeing energy prices shoot up. They're seeing imports, food go up massively.
Yeah.
Are you seeing we talk about it in the bubble of Westminster in a way, but you're an MP and you represent those constituents. What do they come to you and say?
I tell you, it's been absolutely soul-destroying and tragic listening to people's pain and, what they're going through and the cost of living crisis. And the interesting thing that I found, so people think that it's the low pay that are suffering the most, and they do. But the lower paid people are used to managing what little money they have and making it stretch. Whereas those people that are paid more are used to spending and now all of a sudden have to change their lifestyle. So they're almost using the hacks of the lower pay to survive. And, I've got women who have written to me who are on maternity leave who are saying, well, I've now got no money coming in and I can only afford to do one thing, and that's either feed my child or heat the homes. Yeah, it's absolutely tragic. I was speaking to Mind this morning, and they've said that there's people now saying that they see suicide as a way out of the problem. And so we really are reaching a point in our country that people literally cannot afford, this Conservative government any longer. And so what's now happening is that you've got local authorities and all of the charities who incidentally are struggling themselves because people haven't got any money, so they're not giving to charities.
And councils have had their money cut, and they've got these inflationary costs too.
Absolutely. But they're all having to bind together to say, what support can we offer people to make sure people know that they're not alone? And I really hope that if anybody's sort of watching this programme who feel like they feel destitute, to please just reach out. There's a lot of work that the council's doing. The charities are still opening and doing a lot of work, and just please don't suffer in silence. They can go to Mind, they can go to the local council. There's lots of food banks. Like in Brent, we have the Trussell Trust, a great organisation. We've got Sufra, lots of different organisations. Advice for renters if they've got problems with their housing. So and if just on my website, I've actually got a tab on my website that lists all the places you can go.
What's your website? Is it Dawn Butler?
DawnButler.org.uk.
DawnButler.org.uk.
Yeah.
Because we forget the real life consequences of these things. And, I've had poverty myself. It does affect you psychologically. You feel worthless, don't you?
Absolutely. And so, like in Parliament, when, you're challenging the government, they think it's all a game. Do you know what I mean? To them, because it doesn't matter, because the majority of them don't understand struggle. And so to them, it's like, oh, so what? So it's 6 billion. So it's such and such. Oh, we can't afford to pay the nurses. No. But you can afford to just give money away when you want to. It's all a political choice. And so to them, it's a game. But to the majority of us on the other side, it's literally life or death.
Before we get to Rishi Sunak, and Hardeep, who is our third Prime Minister, has some great observations about him. I was just wondering, whether you felt the sea change in your constituents? Obviously, they come to you, they're any political sport, they don't necessarily be Labour, you represent your MPs, you don't represent Randox, you don't represent some corporation, you represent your constituents. Did you feel that sort of sometime that summer before Liz Truss or around Boris Johnson going, the public had just had enough of this, their lives weren't getting better, and, you know, this, and they did start blaming the government?
Oh, yeah. I think when the legacy media started to report all the parties and stuff, I think it really did start to grate on people because they were like, well, whilst we were struggling, you guys were partying and having a good time and laughing, you know, at us and our pain and stealing from us too. And it just became too much. So, yeah, as you were talking to people, they're like, you know, we've had enough of this. So it became more and more intense. And people became more and more angry. And as the truth came out, you know, Matt Hancock said that he threw a protective ring around the elderly before he put them into care homes. You know, it wasn't true. So as all of this came out, and people were just like, wow, so many people died and they didn't need to, because we all went through it.
Yes, it's not remote, is it?
Yeah.
We obeyed lockdown,
Yeah.
we bubbled,
Yeah.
we didn't have
Yeah.
passes.
Yeah. I think that really resonated with people.
So essentially it goes back that far. So, Huddy, which is, I must say, with that PMQs we went to, Liz Truss's last PMQs, whatever it was very interesting just looking at the two sides of the House, because the front bench of the Tory party is a little bit diverse. I mean, there are people of colour there. Behind them are white men, or mainly men. Whereas Labour, you know, the front bench is sort of, you know, it seems it's much more representative of modern England. So that brings the question, which, you know, Hadi writes about brilliantly, the identity trap. Has it worked? Because one of the things that Rishi Sunak points out, we have the first South Asian Prime Minister, we have the first woman Prime Minister. People, and so we're, you know, we're meritocratic, but we're also oligarchs, or we get these contracts. Do you think people are buying it?
I think it was a clever strategy, to be honest, because it does raise the question. You know, they will always throw it at Labour. How comes you haven't had a female MP, Prime Minister? And so they do throw that back at us, and it, you know, and we should have. You know, we've got some good women in our party. Why can't we have a woman leading the party? So we do have to be mindful of that. But there's also, and what the Tories have done is they do that and they say, yes, well, we've got all this representation, but the policies are so damaging to people of colour. You just think there is a difference between, you know, just having representation. That's not enough. You know, because if the policies are actually damaging to the cause, you know, Margaret Thatcher didn't do a lot for women, did she, when she was Prime Minister? So it's like you need to have somebody that's also going to do good in that role.
Hadi, you write brilliant about this, about the politics of representation, because representative politics gets mixed up, doesn't it? It's like, no, you're supposed to represent your constituents, not be a symbol. What's the difference between sort of what Sunak does and what Dawn's talking about with her constituents?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's both a great thing that we have the first non-white Prime Minister. I was very moved to see him at the Cenotaph, laying a wreath on behalf of the government. That meant a lot, I think. But it is also true that just having people of colour in prominent positions, that almost has nothing to do with the structural racism that remains in Britain. They're two separate things. So it's both a good thing and not a thing, in a way. I think it's nuanced and complicated. I don't think there's anywhere, especially in the media, for that to be discussed in a nuanced way. There's a lot of complexity around it, yeah.
I agree with that, actually. It is very, very complex. And you know, it did have an effect in my patch. People did feel very, you know, proud.
Yeah.
So it is very complex. I agree.
Yeah.
And so you can be proud of that fact. We have the first South Asian Prime Minister who's at the cenotaph where millions of people from India and subcontinent fought in our two world wars.
But also, it's not a zero-sum game. It's not, we've had an Asian Prime Minister, you've not had a woman Prime Minister. This is exactly the problem with a lot of our culture, in the media, in politics. Everything is, it's got to be this or that, us versus them. These little sound bites you can put on Twitter and lead, the broadcasters with. And it's all doesn't mean anything. It doesn't come to anything. It doesn't lead to any understanding of anything. And so it's ridiculous. Like, oh, you haven't had the to what end do these stupid arguments get?
Well, it's also the richest Prime Minister we ever had. So it's a good thing for representation of multimillionaires who don't often get a look.
The representation is not just about colour. That's the point. That these conversations cannot be had anywhere.
And class plays a huge role. And because when you come into politics, generally, and this is a generalisation, but you come into politics to help in areas that you understand. Do you know what I mean? So I want to help people, working class people. Do you know what I mean? I want to help people progress. I want to help. So, and you just think, well, if you're a multi-millionaire, who are you coming in to help?
The people of North Yorkshire and Richmond, I guess, who are quite well off and all right. I'm white.
So, given all this and given this cold winter, it's getting very cold, isn't it? And we've got strikes, we've got a nurses' strike, we have a train strike. What is your kind of feeling about how next year will pan out? Do you think there'll be election next year, year afterwards? Because you're both on the street in your constituency and you're in the centre of power, Dawn, with all these people, and you must be talking to MPs and what they think. Without it being a prediction, what's your sense of next year?
It's before Rishi took over from Liz Truss, it was like, we feel like there might be a general election because Boris was really pissed off. He had Nadine, Doris, you know what I mean? They were all threatening to leave and all of that stuff. So it really felt that they were going to be like, right, if we're out, you're all out. Do you know what I mean? Because there's no loyalty when they fall out, which is great for us to see. And so we thought, right, OK, there's got to be a general election. But then they decided to replace Liz with Rishi. So everything changed. And I don't think that there'll be a general election. I mean, if there's a general election, it would be by June next year.
The last possible moment.
Only because will kick in before the boundary changes kicks in, because there's boundary changes. And that's where all of our seats get cut up and redistributed. And that's currently what's happened. But because of this changes to our boundaries, on balance, gives a better outcome for the Tories, they probably want it to go ahead. So that would mean that they would wait to have a general election, which would mean 2024.
And with this new voter ID rule,
shocking.
If they're trialling in the May elections, aren't they?
The new voter ID rule is a leaf out of Trump's book to suppress voting. And really, everybody needs to understand that this is just a cynical ploy to stop people voting. They don't want people voting because they feel that they're going to lose the next election. So the way that they're going to hold on to power is to stop as many people voting as they possibly can. So we've got to encourage people to do the opposite and register to vote, and also sign up, for a postal vote.
The postal vote, you don't need ID. Just to explain, people haven't followed this. We've one of our top stories this year, really, is about the voter ID by Josiah Mortimer. Is that you need now photo ID to stop fraud. There's like zero incidents of fraud.
Yeah, there was one. Was one, and also the voter ID is different for older people than it is for younger people. I mean, as I said, it's so corrupt.
Just to explain that.
In plain sight.
A rail card, if you're over 65, will count.
Use. Yeah.
If you're a student, it won't. And how do students vote compared to over 65s? Not for the Conservatives, usually. So that's gerrymandering, what they call it, like redistricting.
It's shocking that that's happening. And the UN has written a report that says that, you know, fascist governments, this is what they do, you know, step by step, stage by stage, and this government is just doing it page by page by page. It's shocking.
Yeah. But if the majority is big enough, brings me to slightly back around to the media, it won't matter, will it? I mean, if they, you know, Labour are 20, 25, sometimes 30% of the polls, Rishi Sunak has pushed it up 2 points. It's not a swing around by any stage, and all are, you know, if it's the economy stupid, that ain't getting better. If we have another year, how will the government survive? You know, could you get civil strife? Do you really think that they can hold on, cling on like this for another, you're talking for another 18 months?
I mean, they love power, so they're not going to give it up easy.
Like Johnson. They do.
Yeah. So that's not something that's going to be given up in a hurry. So, I mean, I think with the polls, we'll have to look at whether Rishi brings the party up anymore or whether the party brings him down. So that's what we kind of will need to, I think, watch going forward. But yeah, I don't think we'll have an election, unfortunately. But we're just going to have to hope that we continue to hold them to account.
Brilliant. And you do a great job of that, Dawn. Thank you so much for that. You can stay for After Dark, can you? We'll have a few questions. It's a slightly abbreviated version starting slightly late for all the reasons. Thanks for coming in during a rail strike in this cold weather. Heidi, we're both exhausted from the paper, but we'll stick around for our After Dark section. Just to play us out, the other thing that happened this year was, of course, the first major war in Europe since 1945, with Putin's unprovoked aggression when he invaded Ukraine in February, attempting to decapitate the Ukrainian government, but failing. Around that time, our producer, Caolan Robertson, went to the Polish border to meet some of the refugees fleeing Putin's aggression. Here's one of the stories, and we'll be back after this if you sign up at byline.tv, join us for an After Dark Q&A with Dawn. Otherwise, we won't see you till 2023. Don't worry, it's only about 3 weeks away, but until then, it's goodbye from me and Hadi.
Thank you so much for all your support. It really does keep us going. Thank you.